in my class of today's topic, and I talked a lot of times about the problem, but it's time to define what is the problem. Okay, the problem is a phenomenon or a situation in which gap exists between the current state and the target state. And if you see the picture on this slide, there is a gap. The gap is the differences between the current state and the target state. Problem is simply the situation where the gap exists. That means without the gap, there is no problem. Okay. Always where there is a gap, there's the point always the problem is. And as I said, gap means the differences between the current state and the target state. So for example, you are doing quite well. Your performance is as great as your friends or your companions, but you are the only person who set the target very high. So the average score of the English exam in your class is maybe the 70 score, and you got the 70 score in your English class. But if you set your target to 100 score, the gap between your score and your target, that is 30 score point, that's the target you want to fill out. And that's the problem you want to tackle. Once the problem is defined, and then you will think about a lot of different ways to eliminate the gap. That means how to get 100 score in the next English exam. But instead of setting your target at 100 score in the English exam, in the next English exam, maybe you can set your target to 80 score. In that case, the gap is only 10 score point between 80 to 70. And in that case, the problem is only 10 score point instead of 30 score points. And the solutions to eliminate such gap might be totally different from the case where the gap is 30 score point. Okay? And there are some other students who got 70 scores in the English exam, but he think 70 is fine, and my target score was 70, and I got 70. And in that case, there's no problem, right? So problem is the result of two driving factors. One is where to set the target stage. Once you set your target as high as possible, there's a case of the problem arises. And in the second case, that is, the target state is the same, but if your current state is lower, and then the problem arises. But if your current state is as high as the target state, then there's no problem. So in defining the problem, there are two functions to make the problem. One is the current state, and the other is the target state. So in the problems, as always, there's a gap. Without the gap, there's no problems. And to make a gap, there's two important factors. One is the current state, and then the other is the target state. Okay? Let me talk a little bit about what is the problem with some business cases. Okay? This is one of the examples of illustrating what the target is, what the gap is, and then what is the problems. So one of the, in this case, the example of the problem, this graph shows engagement score of our company comparing to that of the other comparable companies. So what is the engagement score? Let me say that the engagement score means the index to show the employees' loyalties and how strongly and they are doing their best to the job or to the companies. So in some companies, the employees of the companies are very loyal and they do their best in their jobs. But in other companies, engagement score of the employees are very low and they do not do their best. And once the opportunity is given, they are very easy to move to the other competitor or the companies. So as always, the company is very cautious in the level of the engagement of their employees, and they do their best to encourage the engagement level of their employees by doing a lot of activities, by giving some the incentives or to provide more time and space for rest for the employees. And anyway, global best players employee engagement score is, for example, 70%. So it's quite high. So a lot of employees in that company, they are satisfied with the work experiences in this company, and they are quite loyal to their employee, and they do their best to achieve the targets of the roles and responsibilities of their role in the companies. When we do the survey of some domestic best players, their employees' engagement score is, for example, 60%. So it's not quite high compared to the global best players, but it's still relatively high. Domestic average player in our industry is 50%. Their engagement level of the employees are lower than that of domestic best player. Okay, because that's the average player, so engagement level is not as high as that of the domestic best player. But when we conduct the survey and analyzed the engagement score of our company, it's only 40%. So it's quite low. If we compare our engagement score of our company employees to the domestic best players, the gap is 20% point. Okay? And if you compare our company's engagement score to the domestic average player, it's only 10% point. And if we compare our engagement score to the global best player, it's 30% point. According to how we set our targets, who could be our comparable company? The problem level is different. If you only compare our score to domestic player, the problem is only 10% point. But if you just compare it to the global best player, the problem is 30% point. But in this case, we define our comparable company, we pick our comparable company as domestic best player. In that case, the problem is the external gap is 20% point. This 20% point is the gap, and that's the problem we want to tackle. So simply saying our company's engagement score is 40%, domestic average player is 50%, that's the simple description or the simple facts about the situation. But when I say the problem, 20% point gap is the problem we want to tackle. And the solution we have to come up is how to eliminate 20% gap in the engagement score. That's something we have to tackle. That's the problems. That's the gap we want to fill out.